Welcome to Blowing Smoke with Twisted Rico. I'm your host, Steev Ricardo. I say it every time. We're back here in beautiful Union Square in lovely Somerville, Mass. at the New Alliance Music and Art Complex with Dorchester's own Herb Morsiglio at the helm. And you always go, yeah, I like that. Consistency. Excited as usual to be here, maybe more excited than usual. I don't know why I'm alone today, but I am excited. First episode of 2020, which I have great plans for, which I hope everyone does. Before we start, I would like to, as we always do, thank our patrons for their continued support on our Patreon page, which can be found at www.patreon.com/Twisted Rico. Thank you, Suke, Lee, Ellie, Andy, Dave, Matt, Maria, Chad, Zach, and Kim. You guys are awesome. Thank you very much for your continued support. I've not been in the habit of listening to every episode from start to finish because then I'll start freaking out about every little mistake I make. But I usually try and listen to the beginnings and the ends to make sure just in case something is messed up. But I trust Herb because he's good, so I don't worry too much about mistakes, audio mistakes anyways. You can blame him if there are any. I'm just kidding, Herb. There's not any. But there is one thing I did notice in the last episode that I need to address right now, and I'm going to make up for it right now. While I was thanking everyone and their brothers and their sisters' brothers, uncles, friends, or whatever, I didn't mention Pittsburgh punkers, the Homisides. And I feel really bad about that because they were actually the first guests that I ever had on this podcast. There was a blunder the first time they came in, and we had to re-record them. They were great both times. They're awesome people. The first time they came in, I don't know what went wrong. My mic wasn't on or something, and we had to drag them down to the Azorean Cafe again. They came back. This is when we were recording in Pittsburgh. And they recorded the second time, and it was awesome. Both times were. You really should go back, by the way, and check out that episode with them. We talked about our favorite punk bands, and we all made lists, and we didn't tell each other about our lists, and we listed our favorite punk bands and songs of all time. It was really cool. And they also played a benefit show that I put on for Animal Friends, a no-kill shelter in Pittsburgh a year ago exactly, with a bunch of other cool bands like Eviction and Volcano Dogs. That show was at Howlers and was really fantastic. They're great people. They're a great band. They do an outstanding version of the Nervous Eaters classic song, Just Head. And it's really special having a woman, Daisy Valentine, sing the song Just Head. You can only imagine what the song's about. That's why I'm saying it's cool. When I first heard him do it live, I was like, this is awesome. You know, Steve Cataldi, the guy that wrote the song, would be very, very happy. Anyways, I decided to make up for the blunder last week, and I'm going to use one of their tracks for our new segment, which we started last time around, called Buried Treasures. Now, this is not exactly a song that's a buried treasure, but it's more like an exclusive, unreleased track that the band gave me. It's called Section 8. So we're going to zap it on right now for you. So without any further ado, it's time for some punk rock.
Political tactics, trims of condos and fine urban living.
that was the Homicide Section 8. They're always political. That's what I like about them. They wrote a song about Section 8. I love it. This track is from the soon-to-be-released three-way split compilation with Ruined by Design and LNT. It will be released on vinyl sometime in February. So as the band's bassist Nick said, and I quote, "You're getting a super-duper exclusive unheard track for our favorite podcast." He didn't say the part about the favorite podcast. I stuck the favorite part in there. He said for your podcast, but I had to say their favorite podcast. I know they're on a lot of radio shows and podcasts. So they do have an EP out already called Make You Dead, which I know you can get on their Bandcamp page. The cover, incidentally, is designed by Anastasia Byerly Bayer, I hope I'm saying her last name right, a fantastic Pittsburgh tattoo artist who I used to see often at Baby Loves Tacos in the Bloomfield section of Pittsburgh. She used to come in with my old pal John. The Make You Dead EP includes the great track ATA, which, are you ready for this, Herb? I know you're going to like this, stands for Anti-Trump Army. We actually played that when I had him on the show. It caused quite an uproar with all those rural righties in PA. So, which doesn't bother me at all because I'm not one of them. So thank you, Daisy, JB, Nick, and Eric of the Homicides. Really cool band. I'm going to always associate them with this podcast because they were the first band I ever had on, and very good people. I just noticed, by the way, that they're playing in April with Field Day with Doug and Pete from Dag Nasty, and they're going to be playing it in Millvale, in the Pittsburgh area. Mr. Small's place, I couldn't remember the name of the place. I've been there many times. Mr. Small's. I might even drive out to Pittsburgh for that because Field Day, I'm really excited to see them. Hopefully they'll be in Boston as well, but it's cool that the Homicides are opening for them. I'm going to talk about Pittsburgh for a little while because I kind of miss it. You know, I lived there for 5 years, so I mean, it's like when you spend that much time in a place, you get to know people, whatnot. The word is out now that Eviction is finally doing a reunion show this coming summer. They were a great thrash band that I signed the Metal Blade Records back in 1989, and they include some of the best and coolest musicians and friends of mine, by the way, that come out of the Pittsburgh scene. So these guys are my friends. I'm excited that they're doing this reunion show. It's been a long time. So that's another reason for me to have to get out to Pittsburgh. Not that, going to Baby Loves Tacos, eating the best tacos around is not a good enough reason. I've got other reasons now, too. I think about Pittsburgh a lot because of all the time I spent there. Even though I had quite the roller coaster ride while I was there, I try to forget the negative aspects of my time there, but I do cherish all my friends that lived there and the great times that I had working at Baby Loves Tacos, and the many fantastic record stores, the cool places I frequented, like the Andy Warhol Museum, the only one in the United States, only one in the world. What a fantastic museum. Carnegie Museum, the Mattress Factory, of course, the Azorian Cafe, the Pear and Pickle, which is right outside my door where I lived in Troy Hill, the Pub and Chip, naming all my favorite restaurants in Pittsburgh, which was over on the south side. I could go on and on. Pittsburgh is definitely an underrated city, which everyone should have their radar on, and they should visit when they can. And I'm going to take a little break here and play a tune for you.
I got sunshine. Six strings in my hand. Anything called again, but you know what I wanna do. I wanna get to. I'm a fun time.
that was Caged Heat, Get to You. You know, Chili Kurtz was on a couple weeks ago, and I didn't play that track, and that song is just outstanding. I mean, the baritone sax, Dana Colley from Morphine. It was recorded in Morphine Studio, High and Dry. So I just felt like playing a Caged Heat song today because I love that album. One of the most underrated records that's come out of Boston in the last 20 years. You know, a lot of people ask me, and someone actually emailed me this week. It was Julie from Greensboro, North Carolina. I don't know Julie, but she sent me a short message, and she wanted to know what are some of my favorite bands I ever toured with were. And I was like, people ask me that all the time because I bragged for so long about touring with bands. So I decided to kind of tell you that today, but I've narrowed it down to 3 bands. Damn the Machine, Paw, and Jackopierce. All 3 of these bands are bands I worked with at A&M Records in the 90s. I mean, I had great times on the road with the Charms, and I was out there with Sting and Bryan Adams and Sheryl Crow and Soundgarden and tons of bands. I didn't go on full tours with all those bands, but I was on a lot of dates with them. The Charms I did. But Jackopierce, Paw, and Damn the Machine, I spent significant time on the road with. I could talk about the Charms, but I was their manager, not their label guy, and it was a little too dramatic at times for me to talk. I'll wait till I have them back on the show. But you can watch the DVD, Easy Trouble, for some of that drama if you want it. I'll talk about Damn the Machine first. If you don't know who they are, this was the brainchild of Chris Poland, who was the original lead guitar player of Megadeth. One of the greatest guitar players in the world. He can play rock, he can play jazz, he can play it all. When I was asked to go on the road with them, I was honored. I spent 6 weeks with them. They opened for Voivod. Some of the dates had, half the tour had Clutch as the opening band. The other half of the dates had the Big F. Besides Chris Poland, it was the 2 Daves and Mark Poland. I did, like I said, I did pretty much the whole country with them. Dave Clemens, by the way, keeps writing me from Germany, asking me where all the video is that I shot from the tour. And I'm trying to figure out how to get it on 8 millimeter to digital. And I'm finding it's very expensive to get these companies to do that. Maybe we can get Herb to figure that out for us. Herb's like, I don't know about that. But the time I spent with them was great. Laura Wessels, who was worked for Polygram in Dallas, she came out to a lot of shows with me. She also came out to a lot of Paw shows with me. But it was really cool being on the road with Chris Poland because every night people would show up with Megadeth records. Peace Sells, Who's Buying, he played on that record. And, you know, they would want his autograph. And so I felt like I was hanging out with a legend every night. One of the most memorable parts of that tour was in New Jersey when they played in Asbury Park. I got together with my old friend Inger Laurie from the Nymphs, the notorious Nymphs who were on Geffen. You might have heard the story about Inger pulling her pants down and pissing all over Tom Zutat, her A&R guy's desk. Yes, she's my friend, Inger. I love her. I got her after I spent the afternoon with her, and she played songs. It was so much fun. I got her to come down, and I took her on the tour bus, and I introduced her and Chris Poland, and they both have notorious histories for, like, I can say it, for drug issues and things like that, but they're both clean. So I hooked them up on the bus, and they sat there and talked for a while. It just gave me a really good feeling to have these 2 awesome musicians hanging out together. So Damn the Machine I put on the top of my list. Paw, okay, now that was more chaotic. You might remember them. They were a Lawrence, Kansas band. They had the song Jesse that was a big AOR radio hit. They were like supposed to be the next Nirvana, you know, because they had that grunge thing going on. They didn't quite get there. But I will admit, when I went on the road with them, I was a little out of control at the time on that tour. We're talking drinking, we're talking women, we're talking debauchery. We're talking great shows and lots of bourbon. Because those guys drank, and I got in so much trouble with those guys. I could tell you a zillion stories about Paw. They were crazy band to be with. But there were also amazing shows. Like they opened for Cheap Trick in San Antonio, and I remember that show like it was yesterday. And I remember the next day I was with them in Houston. It was the last day of my time with them, and I was ready for hospitalization after being on the road with them. They were like one of the craziest bands. Sleaze Grinder wrote a book, and there's a chapter in it that I wrote about Pa because so many crazy things happen. You'll have to go read Sleaze Grinder's book to read about some of the things that happened with them on the road. I love that band. They were fun to be with, but they did some permanent damage to my insides, and they were good for my sex life, though. All the bands were really. It's great when you're on tour with bands and you're young and good looking, the old days, and you have all these chicks, man, every night. The rock chicks show up. But I'm not trying to be sexist or anything like that. They come for a reason. They want to hang out with the band, watch Almost Famous, okay? It's been going on for years. So I had great times with them. The last one is weird, you might think, but really not that weird. Jackopierce, who when I first heard about them and I was told I was going to work with them, someone referred to them as the Indigo Boys. So I was like, okay, I'm a little skeptical. So our whole staff, our marketing staff at A&M went down to Austin and we saw them, and they had all these people there. And it was like girls going nuts, all college kids going nuts. So I said, okay, I'll do it. I went on the road with them and I became really good friends with Carrie Pierce and Jack O'Neill. Mostly Jack because we had a lot of the same interests. You can only imagine what those were. In fact, I remember being in Richmond with them, and they were on a TV show, and there happened to be a strip bar across the street from the show. I know this is turning into a lot of sex talk, but that happens. Rock and roll, sex, drugs, rock and roll, all goes together. And we went over to the strip bar. I convinced them to go. Not too hard. They wanted to go too. And I met Christine there, who I ended up getting to know very well. We had a little relationship. We hung out in Jamaica together. I got her right off of performing on stage, and she kind of became my girlfriend for a little while. You know, love strippers, man, you know. And another time I was with Jack, and we were on the road together, and the Horde Tour was happening at the same time, and Dave Matthews was opening the. It was when Dave Matthews was first starting off, and he was the opening act. And Jack's like, "I'm good friends with Dave. You want to go hang out?" I'm like, "Yeah." Ended up spending the whole day with Jack and Dave Matthews. Smoked a lot of weed. We had a great time, man. Dave Matthews, you know, he's a really cool dude. I mean, this was in like '92. Now he's nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. This is way before he was famous. And those are some of the things, just a few of the bands that I was on the road with. I think I've told the story before when I was with Bryan Adams in Dallas at the Cotton Bowl, and I was backstage. Brian didn't really like to have a lot of people come backstage, but that night he let us come backstage, and I'm standing there in the doorway, and all of a sudden, when everyone's talking, everyone looks at me, and I look over, and Mick Jagger was standing next to me. The Bryan Adams was on tour with the Stones. I saw him at the Houston Astrodome, the War Memorial Stadium in Little Rock, Georgia Stadium, all these big venues. And I got to meet Mick Jagger, you know, not really hang out, not even shake hands, just kind of, hey, how you doing? He said hi to me, and I was like, yeah. Bowie did the same thing too, though, when the neighborhoods were on the road with Tin Machine. So I got to, if it wasn't for being on the road, man, I would have never met even bigger rock stars than the ones that I got to know working for the labels. Anyways, I'll do more rock and roll road stories as we go along because I really like to talk about these things. But those, Damn the Machine, Pa, and Jackopierce, I have great memories of being with those three bands because they were development bands. Those are my favorite kind of bands to work with. They weren't the big rock star bands. They were you know, I saw Sheryl Crow open for the Eagles, you know, and I saw her at Woodstock '94. And all the Sheryl Crow shows I went to were mostly when she already was big. I did go to an in-store with her once, and there were like 30 people there in Chicago. So it was kind of good to see her develop. But these bands never got, you know, they didn't get to that level, but they were fun to be on the road with. So that's about it. It's time to move on down the road. I want to thank our sponsor, JLS Design, 187 Main Street, Leicester, Mass. They do custom screen printing and embroidery. Like I always say, it's a great place for bands to get their t-shirts, hats, hoodies, etc. Anyone can go to them to make their merch. And, if you mention me, you get 10% off. So mention Blowing Smoke with Twisted Rico, 10% off. It's jlsdesignprinting.com, jlsdesignsales@gmail.com. There's more Blowing Smoke t-shirts coming. So when we get them, we're going to get one for you, Herb. And in the time being, if you want to contact me, you can reach me at twistedrico@gmail.com. Instagram, I'm at Twisted Rico. Please send me your comments, questions, etc. As you can see by today, if you ask me a question, I'll talk about it on the podcast. And I'm looking for bands to send me more songs. I'm looking for the buried treasures out there to put on our podcast. And please check out the Patreon page where you can sponsor us for only $1 a month. We really appreciate that. It helps us pay the bills. This is Blowing Smoke with Twisted Rico. I'm your host, Steve Ricardo. And until next time we say goodbye, keep the rock and roll alive.